My name is Mike Sori. I am about to begin my third year at MIT in the EAPS department, Earth, Atmospheric and Planetary Science. My specific subfield there is planetary science, and I'm working with Maria Zuber. What my work entails specifically is I work with a spacecraft called the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, and that's a robotic spacecraft that's orbiting the moon right now. And our lab group has one instrument aboard that spacecraft. It's called an altimeter, and what it does is it sends, as the spacecraft orbits the moon, it shoots a laser down onto the surface, and the laser will be reflected from the lunar surface, come back to the spacecraft, and that the amount of time that the laser beam takes to go to the surface and back up corresponds to the distance that the beam traveled. And what that does, if we take enough laser shots over and over and over again, is we end up getting a full global map of the moon's topography, as we call it. So we have lots of different elevation data for the entire moon. So that's what the instrument does. It gives us this nice big, really accurate global map of elevation of the moon. And what I do specifically with that map is I study craters on the moon. Craters are a feature that on Earth we kind of take for granted. We view them as a novelty because Earth has all these processes that erases them. We're a very active planet. We have rain, wind, plate tectonics, all sorts of things. But if you look at other planets or other bodies in the solar system, you find that craters are actually the most prevalent type of surface feature on a planet in general. And that impacts that cause these craters are the most important, arguably the most important process in shaping a planet's surface. So they're actually really, really important. If we want to understand planets or we want to understand planetary surfaces, we necessarily need to understand craters and how they form and what they mean, what they can tell us. And just as a few direct examples of kind of how studying craters can be useful. First of all, there's this idea that, that craters can house resources or certain types of elements or molecules or chemicals within them, like the spacecraft, the L-Cross spacecraft found on the moon this whole story about water in the moon, and the way that that works, craters can house an area that is permanently shadowed from the sun, and in that way things like ice can be stored in places that are permanently shadowed. A second way that that craters can be helpful is they give us a window kind of into the interior, because craters can penetrate kilometers deep into a planet's crust, and so they can kind of act as natural drill holes, if you will. Well, I always knew I wanted to do something with space in general, something astronomy or planetary science related, and the thing that is most attractive to me about that is the idea of exploration in general. Whenever we send one of these spacecraft out, we're at the stage in human history that we're guaranteed to find something really cool, no matter where we send a spacecraft or a manned flight or anything. And to me, exploring the solar system around us is the logical next step in our exploration. I was an undergraduate at Duke University, and I studied math and physics there. So I actually did not study any geology or any planetary science or astronomy during my undergraduate career. And I just found that gave me a really good background, and that's allowed me to view my work in a very kind of hard science sort of way. In some sense, I'm a physicist, I suppose, not just a planetary scientist. And EAPS in particular was a very attractive department to me just because of the research that the faculty do here. And I like that we have lots of different subfields within the department. So if I'm studying a planet, like if I'm studying Mars or doing a research project on Mars and I need to know something about the atmosphere of Mars, we have a whole atmospheric science section in the department that I can go to. Similarly with geology or oceanography or anything like that. So my main project, as you alluded to, we have two projects to do in our first 2 years here, so I have two separate ones. My main project is studying lunar craters with the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter spacecraft. And the the questions, I'm trying to use craters, study craters to see what I can say about other parts of the moon. For example, if craters in a certain region of the moon have a certain shape or a different shape than in other parts of the moon, then that may say something about the interior of the moon or what's underneath the lunar surface. So it's a combination of data analysis and modeling. So for the data analysis part, it's looking at this map, this global topographic map of the moon, which is basically a series of elevation points. I think there's a few billion data points right now across the whole surface. And it's analyzing that data to study the shapes of certain craters, the sizes, looking at differences in different regions of the moon. And then once I do the data analysis and I see a certain observation, so one observation I've seen, for example, is that craters in the south pole of the moon are shallower than craters in any other region of the moon. And this is something that's never been seen before, that's never been observed before. So the modeling part of my project would then be to try to explain why that's the case, to do some models of why an impact in the south pole of the moon would generate a different shape of crater than elsewhere. Well, the answer so far is we don't know. But again, so this is something that has not been observed before, but it could imply something about impact processes in general. It could imply something about the geology of a certain region of the moon, the south pole of the moon, compared to other regions. There could be different material there compared to other regions. There could be different material under the surface. It could say something about how the moon formed. If there was a lot of heat deposited in one part of the moon compared to another part of the moon, it could that would affect how craters and other sorts of topographic landforms form. Yeah, absolutely. For me personally, so first of all, it's always exciting to have a new spacecraft going up, because like I said, every new spacecraft that we send is guaranteed to make amazing findings, as long as it works. And for me specifically, Grail is really cool because it will directly interact with my previous work using the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter and perhaps help explain some of the findings that I've been working on. Definitely. We got to go to the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter launch a couple years ago, and that was really fun. And this should also, this should be better, since our advisor is in charge of the whole project, so I'm sure we'll get a lot of insider deals. I guess the most challenging aspect is, everything I've described about it being new and exciting, and we don't know what we're going to find, can also have a double-edged sword, so to speak. We can explore something and maybe we don't find something that's exciting, or maybe, I shouldn't say we don't find something that's exciting. We always find something that's exciting, but it can be hard to explain sometimes, since we're at the edge of the field. We can find something and it's easy to get stuck, and you can try and explain something for weeks at a time and then kind of discover at the end that that wasn't right. So it can sometimes feel that those previous weeks of trying to explain your findings was wasted, but you always have to remember that that's part of the scientific process, and eliminating a possible explanation for a finding is just as important, really, as finding the correct one. It's all steps in finding the scientific truth. There's a saying that science is more stumbling around in the dark, blind, kind of groping for the truth, rather than going right up to what you're looking for and finding it in a brilliant aha moment. Well, I still have a few years left here. I've only been here for 2 years, so I'm explaining the research that I've done so far. I'm explaining my findings, trying to model why the things I found exist, and where it's going is it'll connect with Grail. The Grail data. The Grail data will give us a gravity map of the moon, and that will help. That I'll be able to tie that in with a topography map and see if the gravity will explain any of my findings.